Welcome everyone to another week of Don't V Lookup, where we talk to operators of D2C brands to see how they're using data to make critical business decisions. This week we've got Hans Harris from Brumate, which we're super excited about. And without further ado, we'd love to start with a little introduction. So Hans, maybe you could tell the crowd a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I have been at Brumate just over a year, and I have been in D2C marketing now, specifically the growth side, new customer acquisition for a few years, but I spent 6 years at an agency before that, like an SMB agency, spending $500 a month on Google Ads, every penny mattered. It's funny, I actually never thought, actually, I don't know if any of you ever thought, like, oh, I'm going to grow up and be a marketer marketing adjacent, right? That wasn't exactly the kind of career that you like grew up thinking about. But it's funny how
What
I
did you
got
what
into
did you think
marketing.
what did you think you'd be? What was the childhood dream?
Um, it it it, uh, it changed depending on the day, but where I was, that kind of got me into marketing. It was a funny situation. I was actually manufacturing snow skis at the time. I'm a huge skier. I grew up in Montana. I live in Salt Lake. And I was manufacturing snow skis. I thought I was going to be a materials scientist, materials engineer. So that was what I was going to school for. It was materials science, like composite engineering and all that stuff. Realized very quickly that I hated engineering. Could never ever see myself doing that. But the business side and the marketing side of running the ski build like business that I was, the branding, the messaging, the why behind everything, like the selling was what I was interested in. So took an internship at the agency that I ended up working at for 6 years, and the rest is history.
I thought you were going to say
Amazing.
astronaut, but
I would love that. If anybody knows how to get me to space without just being uh, stupid rich, let me know. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
not today.
I feel like marketing was just not a sexy job when we were growing up, right? Like I feel like now it's this like remote work thing and you've got like the Bali marketing superstars that are like making it a little bit more sexy. But yeah, that's definitely not something that I was like gearing up to be when I was a little kid.
Yeah, I
No,
remember
Awesome.
actually for me it was definitely in business school. I took a class by Pete Fader. If you're familiar with him, he kind of is the godfather of lifetime value. And it was the first time I realized that marketing can be analytical as well. For some reason, I thought it was a lot of branding and soft,
creative. You're
psychology
like, oh,
and creative.
advertising. It took me a while
Exactly.
to separate marketing from advertising, right? I think that's a lot of like
Exactly.
problems people have is separating marketing being like a lot data driven and uh, more operational, I think, at times, and then advertising, like that's the creative. Oh, he was going to work at a ad agency and draw pretty pictures, and it's like Mad Men, right? That's not what
Exactly.
most people do. That's not what most
Yeah.
people in marketing do.
And then it's honestly one of the big reasons we started this podcast in general is that there is that misconception of what is marketing and what is data driven marketing, to so to speak. So that's why even just getting into that, I know you are analytical, you have that background. How do you see that evolve over time with, working with the agency and then moving into the brand side and thinking about using data to make decisions?
Yeah. So when I was on the agency side, right, we'd always sell our clients and try to act, data driven. Like, we're going to make data driven decisions to help scale your business. It's really tough, to be honest, to make good data driven decisions when you're working with $500 Google Ads budgets, right? Like the sample size is never large enough to. I mean, you can maybe do some inference, but there was never really like sound, statistical footing for a lot of the decisions. So I think, for better or for worse, I spent a lot of time honing my kind of like feel, like the gut judgment and feel of like, I understand I pulled this lever, this thing happened, I did X, I see Y, even if the number of clicks we were observing is in the like double digits, and you can't actually say like if we were to reproduce this it would happen exactly the same. But it was honing my my experience with a lot of just like gut feel, not truly, and solidly data driven decision making, but it's like what a lot of businesses have to do still. So a healthy mix of, well, we look at data, but let's not let the data mislead us where we don't think it's complete or is telling a picture. Like, let the human side of decision making, as much as we can eliminate biases. Like, I would educate our team, and I'd like train interns, and we'd go through a lot of cognitive biases and like how to try and think through, what am I missing here, what am I not thinking about. Big one that I still talk about quite frequently, survivorship bias. Like, that's always a big one for me. But
what is that? Survivorship
Yeah,
bias?
what do you mean by that?
The business school example that I was given, the case study is like some point in time, the military was observing planes that came back from war riddled with bullet holes, and saying, oh, they were counting where are the bullet holes and mapping them out on the plane and say, okay, we need to reinforce these areas on the plane because this is where they're getting struck, and we want to make sure our planes can keep flying. But it's the failure to ask, where did the planes that didn't make it back, where were they getting hit, and failing to reinforce those areas and actually observe what didn't make it into the selection. That's like super common for me to ask, is like, okay, we're observing, we're making decisions based on the observed, but what are we not observing that could lead us to a very different decision. So all the time, and like with surveying, it's okay, we surveyed our customer base, but who's not buying? If we surveyed our customers who is buying without asking who isn't buying and why, we're missing out on a lot of insight, like good decision making. So
now you're getting to the world of
perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now you're getting to the world of kind of predictions and just the general market as it relates to, again, the customers might not have a purchase, not telling you or giving you signal. What are you doing then to actually assess that signal in a way that actually you feel confident about making decisions?
There's a couple things to do. Like I said, I'm always challenging our team at Brumate to, like, if we're running a survey to our customer list, we'll look at the results and we will take action and make a lot of decisions based on results. But then part of that process, I'll always say, like, okay, how do these results compare to the population at large, right? How are we indexing, in these populations, age, demographic stuff or whatever, and why may that be? Asking those questions of like, why are we showing up so strong here? What are we doing well that's leading to these results? But then trying to say, like, it's the hypothesizing, what could we be doing, or what could we try to improve our results in these other areas to attract more men purchasers to the business, or younger age demos. And so we get into a lot of just like
interesting
question answering and like thinking of, okay, we ran a customer file. It's very clear. It tells us who is purchasing, again, like who isn't and why. But it
sounds like you're almost you're targeting people. You're kind of infilling the gaps with knowing that, hey, we already have this segment of customers that we know really well about. Let's go find a different segment of customers to start experimenting with. And how do you find that experiment or that segment in general? It sounds like, but let me know if I'm wrong on that.
That's what it is. And like a good clear example, we sell these behemoth coolers, these beasts of a cooler, the Brew Tank. And for your Yeti folks, I saw you have the Yeti tumbler there. That's okay.
I apologize as well.
Today, but right, like the Yeti cooler has a demographic, has like a stereotype. Okay, look, everyone's got it. Yeti coolers have like a pretty clear like target demo, if you will. Our coolers, I think, are just as good, if not better in a lot of ways. But the way, again, that we have used data as an organization leads us to optimizing our cooler assortment and colors for a very different customer. And so it's like, hey, I'm a growth marketer. I want to unlock all these different audiences. I want to reach different folks. I want to attract customers that look very different qualitatively from who is purchasing. So like in Meta, platforms, Facebook Ads campaign, for instance, they pitch all the time. Creative is the new targeting. Okay, well, let's start with using creative, trying to sell this cooler that looks visually very different from what we would normally do. And let's see what happens. We write different copy. And we've done tests like that where just focusing, we still use completely broad targeting. It's up to Meta to deliver the campaign. We don't give it any parameters. Just focusing on the creative, the visual of how we show the product, who's featured in the creative, how we write the copy, resulted in a completely flip-flop like delivery of gender from like heavy female to heavy male. And it just goes like to show that if you well, I guess that's more just a hats off to Meta and
their
a
targeting.
proof point that creative is the new targeting. Like you really actually influence who's purchasing by focusing on your creative. But I digress.
Yeah, and I know there's
what would you say? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Will.
You got it.
What would you say is your target demographic, and how did you guys back into that like characteristic?
So Brumate started as mostly like the adult beverage drinkware business. You could probably guess just based on the brand name, Brumate, beers, brews, whatever. But it was a lot of like insulated wine tumblers, wine glasses, highball cocktail glasses. And that's a great place to start for sure. I think everybody realizes that like health and hydration category just in like water bottles, right? We see what Stanley's done. The market is just like ballooning. It's enormous and continues to grow. But I think our customer came about mostly because the business focused in the early days on unique assortment of colors and prints and designs and things that could make it special, make it unique for you. And so honestly, the like assortment got really bloated with like, you could buy this one product in 35, 40 different like colors or prints or designs. So there's something for everybody. And then I honestly think the feedback loop of like, who's purchasing, let's make more of those. Like we have a series of leopard prints. There's like a black one. There's one that's kind of beige. There's a gold leopard. Those leopard prints got really popular. And then we're like, oh my gosh, we're selling a ton of leopard prints. We got to up our POs of these leopard prints in all these different products. But then that just attracts more of the same, right? And we're not saying, oh, why is it that people aren't buying matte black or these like very neutral colors? But
that's
kind of how it came to be, is just optimizing for what was working, truly. Like you have a huge assortment, and then we'll just see what people are purchasing and we'll buy more of that. And then the business just becomes over time the product of that behavior of just continuing to go in that cycle of getting more and more and more of what's working.
I would love to dig into that, but I'm actually going to pause because I know one of the areas that we talked about even initially before we got on this call was one that a lot of customers have been talking about. And that's really customers that are in the Meta Disruptors program that we've been speaking to. They're focused on geo-lift incrementality testing. So I know we went back to the Meta, examples of creative, but one of these constant, tests that we've been hearing about is incrementality and understanding the differences, especially for omnichannel brands. And it would be also like helpful to get a little context on, how much is through D2C, how much is through Amazon, other channels, just to kind of paint the picture as well of why this test might be important. But overall, the floor is yours on that.
Yeah. Oh, there you're back. You froze for a sec. Yeah. So I don't think anybody would disagree that incrementality testing continues to be like the gold standard of measurement, especially in this post-ATT environment. I think, so yeah, the background. Brumate as a business is probably between 60, 70% D2C through our website, and then the other, 30% between Amazon and wholesale. We've got a lot of presence in specialty retails, and so what I mean by that is like your gift shop, like you're in a tourist town or whatever, like a gift shop that sells all sorts of stuff. Brumate's there in a lot of those. We have like really deep penetration in specialty retail and really small like mom and pop shops. But then we also have our larger wholesale partners.
Blame my wife for this is corporate.
It's okay.
So That's a big part.
we're gonna start we're gonna start showing up a lot more. Yeah, I know. We're gonna start showing up a lot more in corporate. We just did licensing deals with like MLS and so like soccer, and you can buy Brumate, stuff with MLS team logos, a bunch of other like college sports we're gonna do soon. So we're getting there, but still the majority of the business is D2C. We did open our first and only owned retail store, the Brumate store, at the King of Prussia Mall in Pennsylvania, which, if you haven't been, it's quite a mall. Um, Very impressive. So we we want to be more omni-channel. We think some of the biggest opportunity for the brand is in wholesale and retail. D2C is tough, right? At a certain point, you reach a limit where like you've talked to everybody on Meta, like, fatigue in your addressable market on these digital platforms, and you got to go omni-channel, but, and it's all brand, but, so everybody agrees incrementality testing gold standard here for us. I've never been a fan, sorry, of like done for you or parts of managed services like measured. Sorry. Um, Meta's GeoLift tool is like a fantastic, obviously open source, freely available if you have a little bit of data know-how, way to do the exact same thing, much faster, exactly the way you want to, on your schedule, adhering to the campaign structures that make sense for your business, and not having to subscribe to like a rigid testing structure in order to get some of these results, which are often more disruptive to your status quo and like business as usual advertising just to run a test than it is like valuable to learn, right? It's more disruptive and like inefficient to do these things oftentimes than it is the incremental benefit of learning. So I think the way we approach it, and I'm very thankful to have a super talented director of analytics, Andrew Jones. He's a wizard, and he does most of we talk. I guess if we have a campaign, we say like, hey, here's what our business question is. We want to know if this type of media, this type of campaign, this product, whatever, gives us some like incremental ROAS, and we'll design experiments, or Andrew will run through scenarios of experiments that we can run, usually based on DMAs. We tend to do a lot of DMAs to figure out what our test or our treatment group is going to be. And then the beauty of Meta's GeoLift tool is that it creates a synthetic control group, which is like oftentimes when I was doing very manual, like geo experimentation in the past life, you're like, okay, I want to target these 3 states, and then I want to, exclude these 3 states or something. And you're doing this very manual. And in doing so, I think introducing a lot of potential sources of error and noise, things that make it really difficult to actually get a solid result based on like good, solid statistical, you know, analysis. But the done for you of the GeoLift tool is fantastic because you just, design an experiment. It tells you exactly, the likelihood of being able to achieve the result you're after, based on different structures. You pick one, it plugs right in, to how you'd want to run a campaign, any tactics, whether it's reach and frequency optimized down to a bottom of funnel conversion campaign. And you can choose too when you feed it historical data, if you want it to be like D2C online sales or like omni-channel sales data, in-store sales data, which is nice because then it's not rigid and like only being useful for measuring D2C outcomes or only being useful in measuring retail sales outcomes. It's very flexible in that nature as well.
And how long does it take you to run this test, for one? And then my second question is, how do you trust the validity of the test itself?
How do you test how do you trust the validity of the test itself? I will get to that one in a sec. But as far as setup, I think it depends a lot on the type of like result that you're after. But I would say in general, these are not things that you can run for a week or 2 weeks and get a really good result. The whole point is we're measuring like the change in whatever it is, sales, online, offline, in geographies based on like the measured lift over, again, the synthetic control being like all the other areas not included in this test. Working again with Andrew, our director of analytics, like we're planning on measuring, like we just concluded a GeoLift test. I think we stopped spending on this campaign like a week and some ago, but I'm purposely not even looking at results right now. We're going to check in at 30 days, at 60 days, and measure total impact over that time. And I think a lot of that is also based on the consideration cycle of your business, where if you use a wonderful tool like No Commerce and see that your customers on average are, self-reporting that they had known about the brand a week before converting, and that's like most of your customers, you can probably get some pretty decent results a lot faster. But if your brand, more expensive, higher AOV products, longer consideration cycle, or is more like omni-channel in nature or more CPG, like in grocery stores, whatever, you're going to want to be patient. You're going to have to be patient and check in on how the incrementality measurement, how the lift is evolving over time. Because you will see, like, if it starts with a lift value that's like 1 or 2% or something, or even a fraction of a percent, pretty immediately over time, that lift percentage tends to get larger, tends to diverge, and it, I think, pretty closely models how your customers tend to convert, how long it takes your customers to convert on average, and how long you've been running media.
What are you expecting to see in 30, 60, 90 days?
That's a great question. I don't know. We will wait and see. But the goal for this last test was mostly if we could just use like reach and frequency delivery of more like upper funnel brand creatives to drive omni-channel outcome. We measure lift in offline sales and D2C website sales, but I think we, even after like the test concluding in a week, I think we were looking at like 1.5% lift over the control, which may not sound like a lot, but that's like that compounds and it turns into quite a healthy incremental ROAS. So I hope that number continues to grow healthily over time. And I trust, based on like how our, especially new to file, like for first time purchasers for Brumate, how long it takes them to convert, we've got a pretty healthy split between folks saying, I've known about you a year before purchasing the first time, all the way down to I heard about you within a day and purchased like right away. We've got a pretty healthy split. So as much as I can be patient and observe, like take as much time as possible and come back to it in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, the more I think for this business question of does like brand advertising and this type of delivery that is just like reach and frequency, we want to penetrate a population like wide, we want to serve impressions to everybody. Does that work for Brumate in generating eventual conversion outcomes? We will see. So far, a little bit, but I would like to see, 95% confidence interval, healthy single digits.
We might come back and check on you, after some of these points and see, what the results are. I think everyone's interested, but I know we're wrapping up, shortly. So in terms of just maybe some remaining questions, what do you think some of the biggest barriers are for people to adopt using data to make decisions?
God, actually, I didn't
or the barrier
question, but that's okay. It's
the validity we'll come back to. Yeah, we'll do that another time.
No worries. I think people, it's like keep it simple, stupid. I think people overthink it. Like I've always been a huge proponent of running my own kind of multi-touch attribution or my own triangulated attribution that is simply a Google sheet where I pull in our post-purchase survey responses, I pull in platform attribution numbers, and I pull in, say, Google Analytics or whatever last click source you might have been using, and just do like a weighted average of the three, or just pick your kind of weights. I think people get held up in thinking like, no, I have to have this complicated tool with machine learning models, and I have to do these things to act data driven. It's like, no, you can use like these different sources, much more easy to understand sources of data, like the post-purchase survey, to make really good decisions. It doesn't mean that you have to, get down to the order level and map every single touch point in the customer journey to make good decisions when it comes to allocating, your media budget. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is like taking the first step and like trusting that like something is better than nothing, and getting more comfortable with referencing various like views on data to make their decisions. Because I've seen a lot of people get stuck and just like, well, if I can't, afford Northbeam or whatever, like I can't do anything. I can't data driven. I can't. Our organization can't behave that way, and it's totally not true. There's a lot of ways to,
that's just a great
just
point.
as efficient.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, just reiterating that, when I didn't know anything about D2C as well, coming in to being an operator, I felt like everyone's focused on a lot of these terms, acronyms. I was like, why don't we just look at blended performance just to start? Because blended performance at least gives a view of, we know how much we're spending on certain channels. We're spending X% on Meta, Google, on this. We should have a relative sense of if we're increasing budget in one area and the cost per acquisition goes up, or blended cost per order, then probably something is also happening with that channel as well. So just reiterating that point, it makes, totally agree on that. Well, I know it's been a great, chance, Hans, to talk to you today about all these topics. I'm sure there's many more topics we can actually dive into, but again, appreciate your time, appreciate how data-driven you are and your organization. So we look forward to hopefully having another chance to speak with you again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.